we're looking at a construct which, yes, originally was built on the dream to overcome nightmares. The nightmares of the Second World War. And it was, and that's the motto of this very conference here, it was a giant leap in the 1950s. Built on tectonic plates, shifting tectonic plates of national interests, but also of global geopolitical challenges at that very time. And we somehow may have forgotten that these tectonic shapes are still shifting, and that we have new global challenges, and that we have new forces that have arisen. And so the static of the original building that was framed for 6 parties, and where we added another 22 units, somehow led to the shape that we see over here, a very rock-solid house. And yes, we have been ambitious, very often. We saw Europe, some of us saw Europe as an idea reaching from Lisbon, Jose, to Vladivostok. It was quite funny when I showed this picture yesterday to my youngest daughter. She looked at the UK and Ireland and said, well, it looks like a vomiting kangaroo. And I told my little daughter, that's very disrespectful. But the picture of a kangaroo hopping away from the grasslands of the continent is maybe somehow fitting. We had other interesting ideas. Not that compelling, of course, even coming from a German. I still love this picture here. The passive-aggressive kingdom, Taiwan next to it, Greece owned by China. It at least offers a couple of impressions. The European Union was based on the idea, and we boast with the idea of shared values. Well, honestly, and let's not fool ourselves, we are already struggling with creating values. Mario Draghi may see it a little different. Let's see how many bazookas he has left. A different topic of values comes also into the play here. And that's the question whether our convictions, our inherited intellectual approaches, and yes, our values are strong enough to counter the cynical simplicity of fear, of economic despair, and of fundamentalism. And that's a value question we should resolve as a European Union, and we shouldn't be too apologetic about what we have created, not over the last couple of decades, but over centuries. On paper, the concept of the European Union, and I do still endorse it wholeheartedly. You may think differently with all these slides. Looks lovely. Freedom, rule of law, respect for human rights, equality, democracy. But Michael Gove has a point. We are in probably the most profound democracy crisis the Western world has seen so far. But this is not only a democracy crisis that we can link to the construct of the European Union, which has elements of a democracy crisis. It is a democracy crisis we see more or less in every single nation state of the Western world. Maybe in the US, maybe in Germany, maybe in Austria, or even in the UK. The question of sclerotic institution, the question of populism, the question of more and more distance of the people towards the so-called establishment, hate towards the establishment, is nothing that's only caused by the European Union or buy European ideas. That's something we see more or less everywhere right now in our Western world. The principle of solidarity, a wonderful idea, a wonderful concept. But if you look at Europe right now, also if you look at the discussion in the UK, but the discussions we have all over the place, is probably the one which is most endangered right now. Europe is dramatically desolidarizing. And that's the most toxic element at the very moment. And the discussion and debate about the refugee crisis is only the tip of the iceberg. Equality. We have touched upon equality since the very beginning of the European communities, of the European Union later on. It was always driven by the dream of equality. Were we ever equal? Was the Europe of the 6 already a construct of equals? No. Neither were the 9 or the 12 nor the 15 all the way up to the 28. We couldn't be more diverse. And I wonder whether we ever come to the conclusion to accept realities, and realities are a Europe of different speeds and a Europe of already concentric, existing concentric circles. But is that a reason to leave such a quote-to-quote club? And then we are surrounded at the very moment, and we already heard some hints about that from Jose, by true and caring friends. Friends who will certainly profit from the debates we're leading right now if we keep doing our debates the way we do. And there are others who also seem to be profiteers of that very development. One point that really strikes me, because the dimension is goes way further than what we've heard before. And that's not only a thing we have to deal with for the next year to come. It's what I call a new magnetic field at this Earth. So not only the South and North Pole, Europe becomes magnetic in many, many respects. And that's driven by major geopolitical developments. That's driven by climate change. And the refugee crisis we are facing right now is and will not be the last one we see. There will others be following. And if we stay the way we are, if we stay as disunited as we are, and think that we can tackle these problems properly, and if we have member states leaving the European Union, if we think we are stronger regarding that very development, I think we are following an illusion. So we've had the debate before. Will we see ever a Bundesrepublik? Probably not. Nobody in Germany wants to be the gravedigger of such an idea, although we have already developments over there as well that are playing with the notion. And that's just a picture ready from 2012, which I just love. It shows us a lot about future influence of the UK, if they go that very path. Again, profiteers of that will be our friends and our friends here. That's the notion of a new, probably postmodern or modern political concept. A concept that had worked pretty well for Germany for the last couple of years. And I once called it the art of being Machiavelli. It follows a couple of principles. One principle, ladies and gentlemen, is to lead without being a leader, but keep the impression you are. And you will at least convince the Time magazine. The second principle is to perfectionize ad hoc decision-making behind a well-pampered facade of ever-growing complexity. The third principle, and this is a success story, of Machiavellism, is to hesitate vigorously. The fourth principle is to keep all options open, but to do it decisively. And the fifth principle is to be mother at home, Mutti Merkel, and mother-in-law abroad. This all added up to a power that has been unmatched in the European Union for the last couple of years, and that played out very well for Germany. But it also caused certain elements of frictions we have to deal with now. So is this concept obsolete? Not yet, but it is at risk. And certainly by some of the players we have heard of before. A league of extraordinary gentlemen and a lady. And, oops, a guy who follows the same principles and the same line of arguments. And what's the European charismatic answer? Sometimes, Jose, I wish you were back. This is where we are right now. Of course, we have undeniable successes. The peace dividend, the four freedoms, and all the other places. But who cares? They do. Romantically, nostalgically. And they don't. Honestly, they don't give a shit. Excuse my French. Why? Because they take it for granted. Why? Because we're lacking a narrative of the wider idea why this European Union actually is still matters for them. And this is the generation we need to convince. This is the generation we need to ignite. This is the generation we actually need to discuss with about topics they care. And that's not the four freedoms, and that's not the peace dividend any longer, unfortunately. But it is climate change, it's the use of technology. It is a new form of communication which we lack in politics, where we have to actually come closer to them. So is technology and digitization part of the problem? Yes, to a certain extent, and no. And that also leads me to conclusions. Yes, as it shows an entirely detached world where one pole is the pace and the speed technology is moving and marching to, and the slow-moving elements of politics on the other side. And yes, technology is taking over many fields of traditional governance, from social services, from cities that need to be run efficiently, to healthcare, to other things. Even foreign policy is affected by technology as you dictate with technology the way we communicate. I once called it from government to Googlement. And is that something per se negative? No, it isn't. It is actually a chance. And it's something if we, instead of bashing each other for each other's world, if we join forces in that very regard, we could come to conclusions that are closer to these young people I've just mentioned. Germans always talk too long. I'm already out of time, but 1 minute you give me. So a solution has to be found also with the private sector in that very regard. It will be hard to do. Because who cares really in that field about dealing with us former politicians and with politicians? You rather keep calm, have another summit. You kick the can down the road or up the road, keeps falling down to the feet, and as Europeans we still call it progress. But then we have to get first the damn treaties fixed, and those treaties are sclerotic. And we have to get them fixed with the UK. And we have to get them fixed also implying these new developments in this world and be flexible enough to come to the necessary conclusions and not only follow our own romantic dreams. And we need new European federal debates. We've never had a discussion like in the US, never ever. And these Federalist papers, European Federalist papers, they can be digital, they can be social media driven, they can need to imply people others than just round tables by the Commission and by national member states. And the European identity in this regard, as wide as it is an asset. As diverse as it is an asset to come to conclusion. Leaving the European Union will make us weaker. leaving the European Union will actually not lead to what we need to find a new social contract that also implies digital and technological elements. And the last thing I'll do as a German who grew up next to Bayreuth, Michael Gove. This is where I come from. Where is he? He already left. That's how the Brits are, they leave. They leave. I put some cushions on the hard benches of the Wagner festivals, and I hope that this warming coming from beneath will embrace him enough to stay in the European Union. Thank you very much.